Welcome back to the Ground Up Show. I'm your host, Matt D'Avella, and this is episode 27 with Gamal Prather. Gamal Prather is the creator and founder behind Original Article and the Instead Company. The former is a design studio, and the latter is a vegan baking company. He even brought some samples with me, and yes, I will be expecting every future guest to bring me cookies. If you don't, I'm going to be heavily disappointed. That conversation in just a moment, but first, if you like this podcast and you liked Minimalism, a documentary about the important things, I've got something that you might enjoy. I recently conducted interviews with the creators and producers of Minimalism, Josh and Ryan from theminimalist.com, as well as Jeff, Marla, and Dave from a company called Spire. We really go back and dig deep into what it took to make this film, those mistakes and missteps we made along the way, as well as everything that we did right. I think it's probably going to be valuable for anybody who is either trying to create something big themselves or somebody who's just curious about what it took to make this film. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff that you might not have known about the film. If you want those interviews, I'd love to give them to you. All you need to do is leave a review of The Ground Up Show on iTunes and send that review, a screenshot of it, to hello@mattdavella.com, and I will immediately send you those links to watch the interviews. And now, without further ado, this is episode 27 of The Ground Up Show. All right, welcome back to The Ground Up Show. Gamal, thanks for being with us here.
Thanks for having me.
Excited to have you. You're somebody who loves to tinker and play around and experiment with things. Tell me a little bit about what you currently do and what your passion is right now.
I work a lot of the time as an industrial designer, which for folks that don't know what that is, because it's a weird name for a discipline, because it sounds like something that it's not quite. But I design consumer products. Beyond that, I also have a company called the Instead Company, which our taglines, instead of that, eat this, and by our, I mean my. It's really just me. I have a lot of people helping with things, just with sort of general consult and people packing and making product for me. But yeah, so that's becoming more front and center, and it sort of started off as something as a hobby, and people started accosting me at dinner parties like, yo, you should sell this. I don't know you, and you should sell this.
Yeah. Which,
again, my background's in mechanical engineering, and so a lot of the way I perceived a lot of that discipline is figuring out why something won't work. And when you apply that thinking to your life, you find yourself not doing a lot of things, or reasons to not do things that you might otherwise have done and enjoyed, because you're trying to be safe and practical and those kinds of things. So it's a balance, like lots of other parts of life. So.
Yeah, I think as the older I get, the more conservative I get, and the more cautious I get.
Yep.
Which I feel like you have to constantly put yourself in check, because it's very easy to just kind of coast along when you find out something's working. Yep. So to do something different, something new, and something that you could epically fail at is kind of hard to do.
It is. And I think one of the things that I think is important for people to realize too is that what I'm doing now is a direct product of what I've done previously, which I suppose is obvious, but I don't think it was to me. Because I think I used to listen to podcasts, and you see people in interviews. I had this insight that basically that's pretty cathartic for people to listen to, because it's people sort of reflecting on life, and not necessarily what they've achieved, but just how they've gotten to where they are to do what they do, or something like that. It's easy to talk about things and to, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But to have done them is different, right? Because you're crying, you're frustrated, you know what I mean? You don't know what you're doing, all those kinds of things. So I definitely like talking about those things, because that is super real in my life.
Yeah.
As far as just the struggle, and I mean, in a very first world kind of way, but.
Sure. Struggles nonetheless. And you sometimes forget too. When I look back at a project, you see the final outcome. Everybody else sees the final outcome. In a lot of ways, there's parallels to social media where you see that final photo and you're like, wow, it's beautiful. Like,
Must have been a straight line right to that,
yeah,
right?
it must have been super easy.
Not even.
Dude, it's really hard making stuff. And that's what this podcast is about. It's called The Ground Up Show. So it's about people building something from nothing and the struggles that you need to overcome to get somewhere. And I think there is the element of individual projects, big projects, small projects, as well as somebody's own journey. And I think that there is so many struggles along the way.
And that's why I was really excited when I got the Facebook Messenger ping about like, hey, do you want to do this? And I was like, absolutely. That's all I'm trying to scream at people is not that it's hard, but like be advised, it's going to be hard, generally worth it.
Yeah.
So do it. Keep going. Whatever your crazy idea is, you should try it because the first one, 3, 5, 7 might not work. Mm-hmm. But somewhere in there, it's like if you're at it that long, something's probably going to work. Like you're going to get smart enough. You're going to start asking the questions and finding the people that have the information to help you get to whatever it is you're trying to get to.
Yeah, I think
to validate an idea or something.
Right.
Like that,
the hardest thing is understanding when something is genuinely not working, or you need to keep working harder.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, because there's not a playbook on that
There's
I'm
not.
aware of, other than just mentors. Again, asking questions and trying to be not realistic, but just, does this make sense?
Yeah.
Like, what am I doing? You know?
Yeah. Like sometimes you're like, well, this has never been done before, but maybe that's a reason why you shouldn't do it. Maybe because it doesn't work. Maybe because that's a bad idea.
Yeah, or a great idea at the wrong time. You know, those kinds of nuances.
So I think you have to. That's why you have to. I think awareness is so important.
Yeah.
So if you're aware of what's going on both inside yourself and your motivations for creating a project and following through with it, that's the most important thing.
Actually, a fellow yogi of mine that I met right at the end of last year. And he and I sat down at the beginning of 2017 and hashed out a bit of a marketing plan and a brand synthesis for the Instead company. And the first thing he asked me, his name is Lee, and just super helpful and really talented at what he does. And the first thing he asked me was, what are you afraid of? And I was like, oh, I got that. That's right. I had that at the top of my list too, Lee. And the answer was that I become beholden to the Instead company or to one of my projects or something like that. Freedom for me is about, living comfortably enough and really not having to do anything. Or especially at the beginning of something when it's not making any money, as the Instead company is not making money. That's I had to get at peace with that I'm not going to sell every cookie I make, or that is made at the factory now. Once I got over that, it stopped. It looked different to me. And but so now I always tell people, like, it's the kind of company where, like, I don't think I would ever try to sell that, because people say, oh, you're gonna sell it for $1 million. Maybe, but I doubt it. What's occurred to me more recently is that I might take these the recipes and license them to huge things. So because to me it's like, well, I don't really want to dilute my brand. I mean, I do want it to be accessible and affordable for everyone in a highly plebeian pedestrian kind of way. But right now that's not real right now. So but what's the fast route is like, man, I could license this to Ralph's because they have a cool organic brand, or to Vaughn's, or to anything like that.
Yeah, you could sell this thing. You could build it up to be really big and then sell it and then get this whole load of money. But then what?
Right.
Then you have all this money and then you don't have a company. And then where's your passion? What are you going to do then? And it's like, I think it sounds nice to a lot of people. And for a lot of people that are struggling, having that money and security would help them a lot. But having a thriving business and having a company that makes you money, or having a job is a damn good start at finding happiness. Because
stability matters and is helpful to, if everything is moving, right? Or you can't rely on pretty critical things like financial resources. I think that pulls the foundation out from other things just practically in life, like not necessarily in your head, but practically that may become exceptionally challenging. And then the mental side of your life may start to spin away from you because you're frustrated or anxious about these very critical life pieces,
Right.
So
you've got the Instead company, you've got Original Article.
Yeah, that's the design stuff. It's called the Original Article. That's sort of design consultancy of one, a freelancer, or I'm trying to position myself more now as an artist. I had this idea that if I'm going to get commissioned to do something at the rate that I want to be commissioned to do things at, it would be smarter to position myself as an artist than as a designer, because like thinking in corporate American terms, the decision makers and stakeholders that are higher up the chain, I suppose, they're like, well, we have a whole stable of designers over there. They make things. But when the artist comes in, the artist is talking. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so I'm happy to try to work that because I want to do great things with really big companies that have infrastructure and distribution for kind of anything. They sometimes just don't have the greatest ideas, or like they have so many tiers of management that it makes a really pure, clean, in the moment, right now kind of idea not viable.
Image, identity, how you present yourself in the world is really, really important. And I think sometimes when you take on like a countercultural lifestyle like minimalism, people think that labels are totally bad. We should never use them. But I don't agree with that. I think you should use them to your advantage. And when I originally switched from Matt D'Avella videographer to Catalyst Studios, that's a huge shift for how I'm perceived in the world and what I can charge companies and which companies are willing to work with me. Because even though it's just still little old me making videos, they see something differently.
Right.
And I don't lie to people, and I don't pretend like I'm not just one person. If they ask me, I'll tell them. And like, I hire other people. When I get a budget, I'll hire other people to come on. And build a team from there. But how you present yourself is really important. And I think, because like if you go on a first date and you don't care, like you don't wear a t-shirt,
right,
or you're maybe wearing sandals, or maybe you're wearing a button-up and a suit and a tie, there's different spectrums there where you could make a mistake that probably doesn't represent yourself in the best way, or is going to lead to a successful outcome on that date.
Sidebar on that note, I was at a recording of The Moth over in Echo Park not that long ago, and they had you make little teams that were gonna fire questions at the person, and one of the team names was cargo shorts on a first date.
That's really good.
Which I was like, oh, smarty pants over there.
You know what? That's advice from my friend Zach Weston. He has been wearing cargo shorts his entire life, and he wears them it's the only kind of shorts he has.
Okay.
It's like, just get a couple pairs of shorts without pockets.
Right.
Maybe just one pair.
Try it.
Yeah, just try it out. It might work. So I'm curious about how you got started. Have you always been into making things? When does your story start?
Less about making things. It definitely starts with my mom. I was raised in a 2-parent home, born in Jersey, grew up mostly in Cincinnati. Both parents around, had my grandma around, and very supportive, great education system. So thank you, Wyoming City Schools. And really, so my grandma and mom grew up pretty poor. And so my grandma had to make a lot of things herself, clothes. Eventually she became a realtor and, had to kind of do some construction herself on houses and make that garage into an apartment, things. So she became handy quickly. And so my mom picked up a lot of that, and I picked up a lot of that from her. So one of the stories I like to tell is that when we lived in New Jersey, we didn't have any trees with branches low enough to have a tree house. So my mom was like, well, let's build one, because I keep driving by these things out on the highway. You see that place over on the side in the cornfield or whatever. And she's like, I can make that. She's like, so we went out there one day, she took measurements, and we went to the hardware store and then went home and built one. Like, and don't have a table saw, but we have a circular saw that we've turned upside down and put it on like sawhorses and like made a table saw. So she was very resourceful that way. And so I say a lot that she could have been an engineer if that was a bit more of what women were encouraged, or if society looked at it that differently at the time, she would have been an epic engineer. So I think that's where a lot of that part of my mind comes from, and a lot of the social things I think came from my dad, because he's hyper social and just very good with people. So that's kind of how it got started, just kind of kicking stuff around the house. And I would take old TVs apart, because they're screwdrivers and I knew how to use them. And it wasn't like I then cobbled something cool out of them. It's like, nope, now it's just taken apart. And I know what's inside it now.
Yeah. Did your parents support that, or were they like, stop taking apart the TVs?
No. That was totally fine for them. As long as it wasn't the real one, that's
Right.
They didn't care. But in high school, I did pretty well in math and science. After, I like to tell this story too, that I went to Sylvan Learning Center when I lived in New Jersey because I would have temper tantrums when I couldn't get the math problem right. And it was more that that it wasn't this smooth, linear, I got right to the answer, and that I may have made a misstep somewhere, just couldn't handle it. Had no capacity to handle that. So from that, became good at math and physics, and was then sort of ushered into engineering.
Is that something that has held on throughout the years, or do you still get frustrated when you're not picking stuff up?
No, these days, I hope this doesn't sound arrogant, I'm generally kind of a quick study on certain things. Again, there's a certain way that I know that I like to have a framework of understanding a new thing. And once I have that, I'm good. I'm not saying I'm going to go do brain surgery or something like that. But most things don't trip me up that badly. It's really more I really like asking questions. And people tell me a lot man, you ask really good questions. It's because I'm thinking really hard about how to figure out this thing. And so I've become better at asking questions to really get the very specific piece that I feel like I'm missing to understand how all this links together.
Do you find that a lot of these skills that you learned early on were building blocks? So once you learn something, you learn math or you learn some of these sciences, you can apply them in other ways.
Yeah, and even just sort of the basic idea of math is, as you advance farther into studying math, into calculus from algebra and all those kinds of, in trigonometry, into linear algebra and robotics type of math, you just see that this is just building blocks. It's just stuff stacked on top of other stuff. So if you're not that great at trigonometry or algebra, calculus is going to be pretty tough. But once you understand those foundational things, it's not sorcery. It's pretty straightforward. So, and I think that's the downside of math is that a lot of people just have this perception and therefore they don't think they can do it, and then they can't do it. And I think the same is true about creativity, where I definitely believe that if you weren't born knowing how to draw, you weren't going to be good at drawing, period. But then I went to graduate school, struggled through that first year, not knowing how to draw in a bunch of classes with youngsters, people 4 years younger than me they could draw better than me with their offhand, with their bad hand, easily better than me. So it's pretty humbling because I did well in engineering, but this is a whole new set of stuff that I love, but was not good at at first. But, I had a friend in school named Nathan that was a year ahead of me and was a materials engineer. And he's like, dude, this is probably the first sort of new agey woo-woo kind of, you got to believe kind of thing, where I was like, whatever. But, and again, he was an engineer. So he was like, man, you got to stop saying I can't draw this. He's like, I know that sounds weird and stupid and just really simple, but just try not saying that and just let's try that. And, from there you start to get better, right? You start to believe. And then from there, you kind of take more risks and you don't worry about so much if that line is perfectly straight, if that circle's perfect. Or
why do you think we have that built-in doubt?
I wonder if it's somehow related to when parents are saying to their children at any age, be careful, watch yourself, right? You sort of have just I think that's kind of just overlaid onto us very thinly, but again and again of just be careful, watch it, don't fail, don't because I maybe haven't given you the tools to deal with failure, right? And I don't even realize that as a parent or something like that. You know what I mean? I think it's that kind of thing where you just have a habitual ooh, I'm going to pull back, ooh, I'm going to withhold a little bit.
Yeah, I think you have to be okay with failing and actually screwing up and being bad. And I think when you coddle and when you are the helicopter parent and trying to make sure everything is okay.
Just so, yeah.
Yeah, I think that doesn't help at all.
Yeah, I think that would make you hypersensitive to when things are not okay.
Yeah.
And also, of course, children generally do what their parents are doing as opposed to what they're saying. And so, if you parent do not handle certain types of stress well, there you have it. I still have a thing with, and I cracked the code on how this works with computers that drive me crazy. I think in my head at some point I had written out the sentence that because it's a machine, it will work the same every time. I now know at age 37 that's definitely not true. I've used plenty of software programs that are all the evidence that is not a fact. And so I think there's part of me that's like, no, this is I clicked on the thing and it's supposed to extrude or loft or whatever, and it doesn't do it, and I feel slighted in some way, and that's why I get so mad. This year I can count probably 4 times that I've done the fist trying to break my desk in half because because I need to get this done like right now, and my computer is for sure not helping me out, and that just drives me so insane because I'm like, this is this beautiful machine that's so amazing and it levitates above the desk, but it's not doing very basic things like opening the file.
I feel like normally I have really good patience and I'm really keep my cool. When Apple does the spinny thing and when I'm trying to edit a project and I'm like, so this actually just happened on Wednesday. So I'm getting ready to release a podcast, and I woke up at 5 a.m. and I was like, all right, I just got to make these final edits and then compress it and then I can post it online. Yeah. And then it's just taking forever to load. It freezes up. I got to exit out, restart the computer, go over again. And like, it is, and
you can already feel it. And like people that work with this, we can feel like, oh no, it's doing okay. All right.
This is it.
Here it is. Here it is. Oh.
And it, you know what? To the computer's credit, it's gotten a lot better. I remember back in high school that like computers crashing all the time. I would edit on Final Cut and they didn't have an autosave feature. Right. So it would be Command S, Command S, Command S. Like every minute.
Anytime you did something, right.
Because you have a couple times where you just lose everything.
Yep.
You lose 3 hours worth of work. And then redoing 3 hours worth of work or more is the most frustrating thing.
It is. And so what I know is from having had that experience as well, that happened, you get through that redoing it much more quickly and you might do it a little bit better because, you've just done it before, right? Just recently. Mm-hmm. But I think what used to mystify me in grad school when I first was really around a lot of creative types for the first time in my life, they didn't seem to learn that lesson. Like it took me exactly once of like losing everything where I was like, oh, I didn't realize that was possible. I will be saving every 5 minutes. Not a problem. Duly noted, universe. I got it. And this is before I was talking to the universe. But I just didn't. It didn't take me long to learn that lesson. But there's constantly a designer like, in the background, lost something.
Yeah.
Didn't save. Just in the moment, I respect that. But you also have to be practical and understand how your tools work.
Yeah. So. I feel like you can't make the same mistake twice, or you shouldn't allow yourself to make the same mistake twice.
Yeah. Sometimes, it's nice to have the Superman float above you and be like, oh, that's what's happening right now. Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to freak out about it. So
yeah, I just did a podcast recently where this camera behind me, the one that was on the guest, he was a filmmaker. His name's Joe Nation, and he's like, the iris just shut. I think the camera turned off. I was like, oh shit. And then I look at it, and then it's like card malfunction, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I'm like, shit. So that's why I got the GoPro up here now, because I'm like, I need a backup.
Yeah.
Just in case, because I want to have video. Video is a big part of this podcast.
Sure.
And if I have no video, I feel like I'm not focusing on my strengths and focusing on what I want this podcast to be.
Yeah. It's not the deliverable you want to present to people.
That's one thing. There's Tim Ferriss does a podcast, and he always has a backup recording for his podcast. He always brings an extra one, and I'm probably going to start doing that. I totally should. I haven't had that mistake happen yet, right? Yeah. So it's like if I end up losing an entire recording, you better bet every single episode after that, there's going to be an extra mic.
There will be redundancies.
Yeah,
involved.
Exactly. Yeah. So do you do that with your work? Are there ways in which you back up your projects, or do you?
I'm heavily reliant on Google Drive. Hasn't steered me wrong. Well, it has steered me wrong, but so I'm about to start a podcast, I think, about that's largely based around design rants. Like I think I emailed to you, because there's just these things where I'm like, who is in the room making these decisions where they're like, should Google Drive should be able to like link multiple accounts to your Google Drive? They're like, nah, it's stupid. We want to have that other little tiny company that can make that software. We want them to have a shot, I guess. No, Google, buy them up or something and just make it work. How, like, I'm an entrepreneur. I have like 4 businesses. Can you please address my needs for heaven's sake? Like, I feel like, am I the only one? I can't imagine that's like, I just got into entrepreneur, so I can't imagine that I am.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of times they're probably designing something they're saying, oh, a majority of people have single accounts. Right. So we're not going to design something.
And I guess what I wanted to get into doing is like, I want to find the folks at these companies that make these decisions and just say, because I just practically, like, if that's going to take another $500,000 of development so that I can do 2 accounts or 3 accounts instead of just the one, cool. Like, and if that's not part of the business plan, dope. I get it. But if I don't know that, I'm going to assume that takes Google, right, who has all the money. That should take you 30, 40 seconds to iron out, and now I have what I want, and I
Yeah.
can sing your praises.
Yeah, I actually was in the room with those people because I did a documentary called Design Disruptors, where we interviewed with Google, Airbnb, Facebook, Twitter, and we got to speak with like their heads of design and their designers. I wish I brought you along, and we could have really put them to the test.
I got all the questions.
But I think it's complicated. I think the hardest thing when you talk about these big companies like Google is that when they make a decision, it affects millions and millions of people.
Sure.
So if they roll out a change, then say even a company like Salesforce, which is business based, these are for businesses. If they roll something out and they have to retrain all their users to figure it out, then that's going to cost these companies millions of dollars.
I can get with that, and I feel, and in my mind, the things that I'm usually trying to convince a company to do are not those things. It's like, you don't have to train anybody on anything new to get more accounts to link to my Google Drive. Like it's just more. Or the other thing that drives me nuts is that a company will implement a new feature or a new way of doing a process and completely jettison the old one as if that completely was useless and worked for no one. Mm-hmm. I say just add it. Is add another way so that those of us that are power users that really like doing it a certain way for some probably obscure reason that they haven't even realized can still do what we were doing.
Yeah.
And it's not like, the Mickey Mouse new toy version that, that everyone can use. Like, that's great. Make that for them. I'm not opposed to that. But please don't take away my super beautiful workflow that I've honed over 13 years. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah.
But, slave to the tools, man.
We were talking earlier before the podcast that your apartment gets a little bit messy, but does your digital world, since you work so much with computers and design, these 3D tools, are you really well organized and you have a really great workflow in terms of your online system?
Yeah, overall, it's pretty ironed out. I mean, there are distinct ridiculousnesses within the workflow. Like my 3D printer is in my bedroom, and that's attached to a Mac that I don't use anymore. And so I just email files to myself, and that's
dude. It's so funny how I do
think
that
there's
same
a wireless
shit.
version of that thing now, or there's probably something I can dongle to the 3D printer that will make it wireless that I just haven't had 5 minutes to go look at because I can just email it and it's over there and I hit print and it's going. So sometimes to keep the forward motion of things is something I struggle with. Like I get distracted. I got a lot of tabs open in at least one of my 4 accounts. You know what I mean? So, but I mean, overall, I'd say it is a very digital thing. Industrial design can absolutely be a highly physical endeavor as far as how many samples you need and place to put prototypes, depending on what the scale of those are. Thank goodness I tend to work on small things. But, I think of the first place I worked in Connecticut called Product Ventures. They learned a ton of stuff there, met some great people, and really got a lot better at drawing actually there because they forced you to draw a certain way. And we had something called the Blue Sky Lounge, which was literally these blue corrugate plastic doors, 4 or 6 of them. And it's like all the sort of Rubbermaid containers you can imagine of all the packaging that people at the company had collected from trips over 20 years. And I always forget that Peter would always come out, the owner would come out and say, "Where's the Israeli wipes tub?" Or that was the Israeli wipes tub, and was the other one, the Dancy bottle. That's what he called it. It's this bottle that I describe it goes like this. Like it just has this sort of weird swoopy thing. And that was like his favorite reference. And like my roommate at the time, Aaron, managed that part of that business and would have to like go dig out these freaking samples. So it can be very physically demanding from a space standpoint, but I've worked pretty hard to make it not that way for myself because I work from home.
Yeah, I feel the same way with the filmmaking gear. It's just there are so many cables, cords, wires, batteries, battery chargers. There's so much stuff that I have, and even as a minimalist, it can get overwhelming. And when I'm prepping for a shoot, I will lay it all out on the apartment floor and figure out, okay, I need that, I don't need that, and then put it in the bags that I need. I think in an ideal world, I would have an office where I'd have a rack, and there would be all the gear neatly organized, and then I could take it out and put it in the bags I need to when I'm preparing for a trip, or a shoot. But I feel like no matter what, there's always gonna be a little bit of chaos, and I think that's life in general. Is that whether it's your desktop or it's your apartment floor, it gets a little bit messy sometimes.
Yeah.
And then you just have to, every week or
Take
so,
your time and put it back.
clear it,
Yep.
figure it out. And when
Put it
you
where
have
it
less
goes.
stuff and when you're more intentional, it's easier to clear that stuff out.
Yeah, and I would say, like, for example, my digital like file system, which is just folders. It's not like I use a special thing for that. I'd say that's pretty tidy. I don't know too many other creatives that have a system that is as ironed out as mine. And I say that from having looked at other people's computers, and I'm like, whoa, wow, how do you find, this is why it takes you so long to do things sometimes. You know what I mean? And like, I can find any file of any project I worked on in probably 10 or 20 seconds.
That's amazing. That's what I do with because I have so many hard drives. I have probably about like 20 to 30 hard drives, most of them 2 terabytes, some of them 10 to 16
and that
terabytes.
video stuff, man.
Yeah,
it's a lot of data.
It's unreal. Actually, what I've been doing lately is because hard drives don't last forever. So I'll have these old hard drives that were 1 terabyte, that were 500 gigabytes from college even.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to delete it, because I like keeping everything. It's just nice to have those projects. And as we were talking about before, it's not that hard to keep digital stuff versus physical.
Yeah.
But so what I'll do is I reallocate those to a new hard drive. So maybe I'll buy a 10 terabyte hard drive and then put 10 old hard drives
Into
on that
one, yeah.
one. But then I'm not going to, I used to actually write on it. I would like either do one of these laminate things or write by hand what was on that thing, on that hard drive. But sometimes it changes. Sometimes you delete projects and it's always changing. So I started a Google spreadsheet and I have each hard drive listed. And so if I'm like, a client from 3 years ago says, hey, by the way, do you have that, a clip from such and such shoot?
Yeah.
And I just pop up the Google spreadsheet, do Apple F,
here it
and then
is.
I find it and then I can pull it up. And the biggest benefit of that is just like, I feel organized. I feel like if anybody came to me and asked me for a project, I wouldn't have to stress out and be like, shit, I got to go through 20 hard drives to find that
just
project.
to find it, much less know if I have what they need in that, yeah, I agree. And I think I think to me, that was the lesson, was like, the system doesn't have to be universally the same. It just has to work and be logical and preferably easily explainable to someone else, I've discovered. I have a client that has what I would say is a dubious system, because the way that they think about revision, I've always bumped up against this when I've worked at places or worked just with people independently, is the way that people manage revisions and changes of files is
Dude, I could probably use your help there.
Is stuff of magic to me. Like, I rarely put a date. I just put a rev number on stuff, because if it's all I need to know. What
does
the
that
latest
mean,
one?
rev number?
Just a revision number. It's like, revision 1, revision 2, and then
do you do V1, V2, V3? That's basically what it looks like.
Yeah, it's just like hyphen space VO1.
Sometimes I'm hesitant to do V1 because I'm really confident that I just knocked it out of the park the first time, and that the client's gonna look at it and be like, "Wow, this is V. Like, this is the only V."
Right.
Because then if you say V1, then they're gonna start thinking like, maybe we should ask him for changes. But I feel like you're not gonna get out of that no matter what.
Right. Yeah, that's always coming.
And did you used to have this process as well, where it was a little bit chaotic?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I tell people I should put it on my website because I think it's funny and it's true. It's like, there's no final. I don't want to see final.
Oh my God.
Anywhere in a file name ever in your life. Don't send me that, because it's not final. Because now final, I mean, even if you put, like, to me, it's like, it'll be like V47 space to production or to client.
Deliverable, whatever.
But it's
it
not
is.
final. Like, because until I'm dead, or you know what I mean? Like, someone can always ask me for a change.
That's a curse.
Yeah,
putting final on it is
is
asking for an extra version.
Oh, yeah.
I've done that and I still do it. I still get into that habit. And then I write final on it, and then a client will be like,
inevitably,
all right, we need to make a quick change. Oh, can we just do a little bit of alteration on this? Can we change the end tagline? And I'm like, final V2.
Right.
Final V3.
Yeah. And it's like, yeah, you get into these substructures within a file name, and
then it becomes a little confusing.
Yeah.
This is a little bit nitty gritty, but for me, I sometimes mess up where I have a couple versions internally with myself. So that's what's hard for me, is that, do you send a client then a V3 as the first version, or do you
No. Yes, I would. It's like, that rarely trips them up. We rarely ever talk about it, honestly, but I tend to make reference in an email, like, well, in the VO1 file or the VO7 file, whatever, it looked like this screenshot, but in the V22 file it looks like this screen. You know what I mean? And just so that there is some kind of reference point for them. That, but it's one of those things that I know if I'm diligent enough about it, it's usually enough to carry the project, and we don't lose things, or we don't get completely confused about which version we're talking about.
Yeah. I think that's good advice, is to just, if you're going to work on projects internally to yourself, start by just keep the same structure throughout, and don't send somebody rechange it. Because that's what I would do sometimes, is because I want them to think it's V1 for whatever reason. I think it actually looks good. It looks better to say V3, because then they know that you work through some shit.
Right.
And that this wasn't just the first thing I thought.
Black box, here it is. Yeah, I think that it's one of those things, a conversation, I like when I speak to students, which I'm trying to get to be more frequently, like, to me, that matters. That matters as much as, like, whether you're on an Apple or a PC. Like, that sort of transcends what platform you're on. It's like, either you can find files or you can't. Don't waste time. Like, it's just not a thing worth wasting your life on, because the time it takes to set up a system that works for you, and to pay attention and evolve it over time, that amount of effort, I think, time it takes is like orders of magnitude smaller than what it is to be like, oh, I gotta find the file.
Yeah, there's this mentality that to be creative,
quick, fast, I gotta be quick and light on my feet. Nope, you're gonna make a mess. Don't do it.
Yeah, there's this mentality that to be creative is to have chaos surrounded you. Paper is scattered everywhere. To have a desktop that's just cluttered with nonsense and project files and screenshots from years ago. And I've found that to be the biggest impediment to actually creating something. Yeah,
and I say all the time when I'll be on the phone as a client emails me, like, oh, look at this, blah, blah, blah. And I'll say, hold on just a second. I got to put it where it goes. And I find that with my desk, physical desk, usually I have a ton of clutter there because I don't have shelves. I don't have buckets and bins, and I know that I need them now. It's the same kind of thing where, they say you walk the path before you pave it or whatever, like on a college campus. You kind of see where people walk first and how they get to the buildings, and then you put the paths in, before you get...
Yeah,
don't get crazy before we start pouring concrete. Let's figure out what we actually need versus what we think we need, or what looks pretty on that page, or whatever. You know what I mean?
Right. So maybe take a couple weeks to assess and see how you actually...
Yeah, I mean, I'm on desk at my apartment. I'm on desk V5, I think. Set up. I do it kind of once a year. I'm like, all right, this is what isn't working about this for me. Like, I want to be standing, or I don't want to be standing, or I want there to be nothing under it. You know why? So I can clean more easily. You know what I mean? Like, if I don't have stuff on the floor, I'm much more likely to clean the floor. And I'm in there test baking stuff all the time. So it's like my floors get dirty, and if I don't clean the floors, that's gross. So it's like I'm trying to facilitate behaviors for myself, so that, like, even in my living room, like my living room and kitchen are sort of connected. And it's like I'm trying to get as many things off the floor so it's as easy as possible for me to sweep and mop.
You know what's funny is because we're like robots. We actually don't because we're not always conscious of the things we're doing. So it's funny that we have to set up our apartment or our home in a way that we're going to do what we want us to do.
And I think that's one of those things about life that's probably kind of taken for granted, and but I think just a bit of attention, not to like learn about design, but like just a bit of attention to that might really change how your day goes, or that thing I'm always fighting with when I get out the door or whatever. Man, like maybe move the table down 5 inches. You might not catch your bag on it every time you walk. You know what I mean? Like that's the type of intention and awareness that I'm trying to always cultivate, is like, because those are things that like start to flare up and get out of control like the rest of my day. I might be rude to someone because that thing just happened, and I'm trying to like always put those little silly fires out and like not get mad about things that definitely don't matter. You know what I mean? Or like I recently dumped a pretty healthy smoothie all down my center console. All down. And it's like caked onto the seats, like, and the old me was furious about that. The new me is like, all right, let me remember next time to put the top on actually and not visually.
Yeah, but
and move on.
When you look at that instance, I think it does matter everything that led up to that throughout the day. So if you had all these other instances in your life where you were frustrated, where the door wouldn't close, or where your lock was jammed, or whatever, it's just these things will build up and fester. And then when that happens and you've had a bad day, you might be like, fuck. And then, you might actually react in a way that isn't socially appropriate.
Right. And I think that's the thing too, is to try to think about how to mitigate those things that drive you crazy and to be aware of them, because most of that stuff is just doesn't really matter, and that's what I was going to say, is that it feels like the world is happening to you, like things are happening to you. It's like me versus the world. But I now realize that I contributed to that smoothie dump because I didn't put the thing on because I wasn't paying attention. I should pay more attention, not, man, this is a crappy day. No, I should pay more attention. And then it won't be a crappy day. You know what I mean?
Yeah, take responsibility for the shit that happens to you and the shit that you do.
Right, and I think a lot of stuff does happen to people, for sure. When people yell racist things, like that happened to you. That's not about you. And that's the other thing. That's not about you. That's about that person. And ironically, I think I saw this on Instagram. There's a little quote that was like, when something happens to you or someone does something rude to you, and your first thought is, man, I wonder what's going on with that person that did that to me, you're headed in the right direction. Because you realize that when people do things like that, I nowadays say things like, that's not the natural state. I don't think that's how we are naturally. I think we have enough of these like little perturbations throughout the day, like little crappy things that happen, that sometimes that, again, like we said, that pus or bursts open into rudeness or something, right? Mm-hmm. So it means something probably happened to that person, and like, they might need it sounds really hippie, they might need a hug, or like, but they might need some compassion, or they might need some understanding, right?
Yeah.
And to realize that, like, when that happens, that person's not just a dick. Something probably happened. Almost certainly something probably happened.
The thing that I struggle with, and I have to consistently remind myself, is don't let other people control your emotions. And if somebody can get in your head, if somebody does something as small as beep their horn at you, which happens in LA a lot, there is this feeling of, well, fuck that guy.
Right.
But they just changed my emotional state. They made me change who I am and be angry and be frustrated and outlashed.
Or I allowed that to happen.
I think that's the best way to look at it, is that I shouldn't allow these other people. And then these thoughts will come up. It's kind of like meditation. These thoughts are going to pop up, and then you just be like, not just throw it away. Like, I don't need that. I don't need to actually be a jerk to this person.
Right.
And actually give them back what they're giving to me.
Yeah. I mean, there's still part of me that on certain days feels like I'm ready to burn the bridge. Let's just burn it. You know what I mean? Yeah. But then I think about, like, no, that's old thinking. Like, that's not productive. You know what I mean? And that's just from an old place, So, I try to avoid it where possible.
Yeah, it sounds like you've changed a lot in your life and you've learned a lot as you've gotten older. And how much do you think people can change? And a lot of times we think our personalities are so tightly.
Nope. I think I still see myself as largely the same person, but just my approach to certain things that are kind of everywhere has changed a bit. And so I think, yes, people can change 180, they can make a 180, I guess. But I think that's about probably just a few things that impact a lot of how they see the world. And the change, and I would mostly credit the changes I've made to working with Darcy, the life coach, and with doing a lot of yoga. And when I got into yoga, it was purely out of a physical, it's like, oh, exercise, let's go exercise in the yoga room. And the first time I did it was in New York. It was hot yoga. And I did it because a woman I was dating was like, let's go to yoga. And I was like, okay, sure, let's try it. And that was humbling. And so, I kind of kept going back, and none of the mental benefit, which is really why I'm interested in it now, none of that became apparent to me until I moved to Los Angeles, and probably, I've been doing it maybe 6 years or so, probably in year 3 or 4, that started to become much more clear what was happening mentally, and how not stoic I was, but how I was saying to someone yesterday, like, I feel like things hit me now and they just fall to the floor. Like, they don't stick in me, they don't go through me. It's like I feel a lot more impenetrable to things that, again, don't matter, that used to seem like they really mattered.
How has yoga helped that?
Because it's weird. It's in a way, it's like what I remember of going to church, where you get in, they tell you things, right? Like they're teaching you, not just poses. So the first thing I think that really hit me and stuck with me, there's a teacher who I haven't seen in quite some time. Her name's Mickey Duran. And she said, right at the end of practice, she was like, "You're already complete." And I was like, whoa. That's not what I was told before.
You start crying.
Yeah, right.
You're like, hug her.
I think I've only teared up probably twice in all the time. I'm these days I'm like a 6-7 day a week kind of yogi. And again, I'm like a pretty mainstream kind of yogi. Like I'm not about the Sanskrit, because again, I see that, even that, someone actually broke some science down. They're like, well, a lot of the, what's happening in your mouth when you're saying those Sanskrit names of things actually affects your brain from how your tongue is hitting the roof of your mouth. And I was like, wait, what? And he was like, yeah. I was like, oh, okay. So all of a sudden,
can you explain what that is? Because I don't do yoga, so I don't know what a Sanskrit is.
So like, gosh, I'm gonna try to remember one and what the Western name is. But like, say you're in Tadasana. The way that your tongue is hitting your mouth, and I'm trying to think what Tadasana is. That might be mountain, which is like you're just basically standing with your arms up over your head and big proud chest, and your legs are doing a certain sort of turning inward, and so to me, so a lot of times there are some teachers that are like everything. They're like, okay, so now we're going to move into this pose, and they say the Sanskrit word that like I don't know what that means, but I'll know frog, or I'll know mountain, or I'll know pyramid, or downward dog or upward dog.
So they're the names for the poses.
Yeah, sorry. So they're the names for the poses. And to me, I see that in many ways as a barrier to people that might get a ton of benefit, especially mentally, out of yoga. Because they're like, that's just like 1 degree of Easternness too much for me.
Yeah.
To set aside the aesthetic of yoga and yoga studios and what a lot of the decorative elements of that are in a yoga space are, I think that's another degree of of disconnect for people. So I'm fascinated looking forward at yoga as like, well, how do I make this I want to make it much more technologically advanced, and I can talk about that in a minute. And also I want to make it more available to more people because of the benefit I've gotten out of it, which is, again, forget about the physical stuff. I'm much more interested in what it does to your brain, and then therefore how you behave as a result.
You know what got me into yoga, and I said I don't do yoga, and I currently don't practice yoga, but I've done it a couple of times. And what got me into it, actually, believe it or not, was P90X.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I tried that P90X for a little bit because my brother just like made this massive transformation.
Sure.
Where, and I was like, oh, that'd be a fun challenge to just do P90X for however long it was. I think it's 90 days, but it's like 90-minute sessions, but it's really intense.
Yeah.
And
I've done it just briefly, but so yeah.
Yeah, and then the last day of the week is yoga, and I couldn't get through 10 minutes of it out of the 90 minutes. I was like, oh my God, this is crazy tough. But I think something like that, where that is not positioned as a spiritual practice at all, but it's almost like a gateway to get into it. And I could see like, okay, like this is really tough. I joke around and I made fun of my brother, and I would ask him how many miles of yoga he ran today. But awesome. And like, a lot of people make fun of people for doing yoga, but it is truly tough. And it's a practice that I could definitely see benefiting me from so many perspectives, from strictly the physical element.
Oh yeah, and absolutely. I mean, I'm from a physical standpoint as it pertains to yoga, I'm much more interested in alignment and not injuring myself, because I had a wrist thing going on. I couldn't figure out why. My buddy Andrew explained, he's like, oh, show me your down dog. And when I was in it, he like went and sort of flicked my fingers. He's like, yeah, I shouldn't be able to flick your fingers up like that. He's like, so what happens when you press your fingers more strenuously is now you've engaged different muscles here that engage muscles here. So now you're loading your shoulder more correctly. And that's why I was getting this weird little twinge back here, is because I was compensating. I was injuring myself and didn't really realize it. So I think that's one of the things I would tell people is like, if it feels weird, stop doing it and ask a question. and because almost certainly you're doing something in a way that's everybody's bodies. And that's the thing that everybody's body is different. So like I designed these yoga blocks, which are down here actually.
You made it?
I did. So I designed yoga blocks. It's still the same 4x6x9 cube. I just put words on it, trying to keep it simple, folks. But and that that was a big learning process. This is like the simplest thing I've ever created, ever. I mean, it's a block.
You know
for
what I
heaven's
love?
sake. But it was
yeah, just that idea.
It was crazy getting it done. Like,
Really?
trying to communicate. Like, you'll see that these things are missing. Like, this piece is all off to one side.
Yeah.
I'm like, but my document was so beautiful and
specific.
Oh. It doesn't. It doesn't. What kills me is that people don't necessarily pay attention the way I was expecting them to.
Yeah.
Right. So the lesson was, I should either just have blocks made at the factory in Asia and have them send them to me, and I should just screen print them here with someone that is going to nail that every time, versus getting it right when they feel like it. Because again, it's I've been to Asia just a couple times for work, and there's a cultural difference. Someone did a wonderful job of explaining it all to me of how these miscommunications happen, or how they consider things differently than we do. And how that leads to just, stuff being misaligned, or like they don't set it back until it's like way off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
You know what's ironic about the fact that, because it's peace and it's supposed to remind you to be peaceful, and then you just get nothing but frustrated when you look at it, it's unaligned.
Yeah. Well, like, and again, at this point, I'm definitely peaceful with it. But like when I was going through samples and like getting, my first samples were money. Like they did it right once, but did they do it right 500 times? No. And that realization was like, my expectations were too high. I've never worked with these folks before. And even though I can be clear as day, doesn't mean they're going to do it right.
I gotta be honest, I don't know what this is.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's a yoga block, right?
Right. So what you do with a yoga block is it helps sort of extend you to the ground. So in general, it's helpful to be well grounded, meaning like if I'm going to come up from like a push up, or like if I'm standing up into a standing pose, you really want your feet to be well aligned, gripping like nice and evenly. So because from there, again, it's just like with the hands, like if you're kind of on it, you're going to compensate for this imbalance all the way up here, all the way up the chain. So if your feet are grounded properly, now your lower leg and your knee will be supported properly, and everything is loaded, and your posture gets better, and you're able to expand more. And that's all you're doing. You know what I mean? So this helps. So again, I'm 6'2", so this helps like in a standing where I'm like I can't reach the ground, and so to reach the ground, I'm gonna have to do something that might not be safe for me to do. So some people, I think, look at them as like crutches, but they're not crutches. They're awesome. They make it comfortable, and not painful, and you don't feel like I'm gonna risk it. It's all that's gone when you have props and bolsters and blankets and straps. So I was trying to make something that was cool and stylish, because literally I got so into using them at the studio. I don't really have a home practice, but I imagined that I would, and I was like, well, I want a cool pair of blocks. There are no cool blocks. I made them. So, I mean, there's things with like a few little graphics on, but nothing I was like, I can identify with this product. So, that was what I decided to do. And, I met a guy that, named Adam that has a great online selling course. And this is before he had the course. And he was kind of betaing that. And, so he had a group of friends all kind of learning how to do this at the same time. And I'll be honest, this has been pretty much a wash for me. Like I would not count it as a success financially, which is for sure why I was doing it beyond just trying to get a cool product out there. But I learned a ton doing it, and and again, that feeds into what I'm doing with the Instead company. So when I was saying before that a lot of the stuff is stacked on itself, you're probably gonna go through some stuff, break even, lose a little money. But one of the things he said to me when I was really frustrated, he's like, you have to be glad that you're learning like a few $1,000 lesson. He's like, that same lesson that you're learning, I learned for $30,000, and doing the same Amazon type thing. He's like, I learned that for $30,000, right? So I was like,
Yeah, I've made those mistakes myself.
Duly noted.
I've made those mistakes where my first office in Hoboken, I'll call that a $10,000 mistake, because I was like, I was living in Hoboken at the time, and I had this infatuation that I needed an office. That having an office space would make me legitimate. And it would be so great to be able to separate my personal life from my business life, and so many other things that I rationalized to make this seem like the best idea in the world. And then I got an office space, and from day one, it was the most frustrating thing I'd ever done, because then I had to do things that I didn't like doing, which was decorate the office. I had to get the internet. I had to figure out the blinds for the building, because there was direct sunlight pouring in. I had to figure out security, because the day that I moved in, a woman next door to me says, oh yeah, you probably shouldn't leave your computers here, because we had a break-in the other day.
Dope.
And then I was like, this is great, because I have tens of thousands of dollars of equipment. I guess now I'm keeping this at my apartment. Obviously I probably could have went about all this in a better way, and I could have gotten the right place for me. But what it came down to for me, what I realized was that the space isn't as important if it's just yourself.
Right.
It's if you want to get an office space for your business, it should be to collaborate with other people, to network and meet with other people. And it needs to be comfortable for you to be able to work from there. You have to take into certain things into account, like how long is it going to take me to get to work? Am I going to have to pack a lunch now? Is there a kitchen where I can cook and do all this stuff? Because
just zoom out a little bit from this thing that you may be a bit infatuated with, right?
Yeah, and sometimes you got to actually make the mistakes yourself. I think a lot of times we can learn from our mentors and learn from other people, so we don't have to make the mistakes. But sometimes we just dig our heels in and we're like, I just got to do it.
Yeah.
And then, so I spent $10,000 over the course of the year on this office space. And then by the end of it, I was frustrated with myself, but at the same time, I was happy to be out of it and be like, all right, I learned that mistake.
Yep.
I won't do that again. And I've had office spaces and I've used WeWorks and stuff that's been more affordable and more appropriate for the work I was doing and allowed me to connect and meet with new people. So there's certainly the right way to do it, but a lot of times you just got to make the mistakes. And like you said, sometimes just, I didn't waste $50,000. You know what I mean? It was for me, it was okay. Like, all right, it doesn't totally screw me over.
Yeah.
I can use it as a write-off. Write-offs are the best thing in the world for making business mistakes.
Shout out to my friend Seth, who I met through the internet, about design dorkery. He just put in touch with an accountant that sounds like is going to be amazing, which is a very sort of entrepreneurial small business, like, oh, that's amazing thing to be excited about.
You get super excited about accountants.
Because it's the kind of thing that like I just don't want to do. I generally
Have you been doing it yourself?
No, I was with a company that has been helpful in certain ways, but not in others. And I decided to advocate for myself, I suppose, in as much as I was like, all right, they're really nice people and they definitely do my taxes well, but I would love for them to give me a different heads up about certain things. And then I almost got charged a bunch of money out of nowhere. I was like, well, how did it go up by a factor of 10? I'm broke, right?
When you find the right people, you know it. And
I could tell the second I talked to this fellow on the phone. It was like no look passes. Like, it was great.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think you do have to focus on what you love to do, especially when you're doing your own thing and running your own business. And sometimes you can get by doing the accounting stuff, but like a lot of times I'm like, it's not worth the risk for me to do it myself because
I don't want the blowback of that.
I don't like it. And also, if I screw up, I'm going to screw up bad. And that's Uncle Sam that's after you.
Consequences.
Consequences. Man. Like, they will throw you in jail if you don't do your taxes. When did you decide to start working on your own?
Worked in New York for 4 years doing the eyewear design thing, predominantly on Nike's brand, which is amazing. And I got to learn so much. I got so much better at 3D, which is now the very center of what I see as my tool set. And got tired of being in New York and moved to California.
Hey, me too.
Yeah, right. Made it out.
I moved out here in July 25th, so like about a month and a half ago.
Okay.
I love it here, man.
I first moved to Santa Barbara for about 9 months, and I worked at a studio there where I met my former business partner and still very good friend Darius. And I remember standing on my back porch in Santa Barbara crying my eyes out because I was so scared to like try to go to LA with Darius and try to do this thing that I definitely don't know how to do. I mean, I know how to do design. I will out-design most people. That's where all my high school competitiveness has gone, is into like, I will out-design you, son. Watch yourself.
Yeah.
But we made the leap, and it's kind of a pretty typical story from what I've come to understand. But basically, we went to a trade show and drew up our little business cards, got our little portfolio together, and that studio that we both worked at always goes to CES, or usually goes to CES, the Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas, just trying to drum up business. So Darius was kind of the black sheep at that studio. No one knew why he was there or what he was doing, because he wasn't really designing. He's more like office managers, client relations kind of guy, but had design degrees. And so he kind of just disappeared into the crowd. And I got a text like, all right, meet me in conference room, whatever. I'm the CEO. You're the creative director. Let's do this. We meet this couple that owns a company that makes like Logitech type things, computer accessory type things in Central and South America. They look forlorn, to put it mildly, in their booth. Like, there's no design involved. Like, we stamp logos on stuff and that is all. And so Darius was like, yeah, we can do all this stuff. And so that was our first client. So also the brilliance of having a business partner. Sometimes they know how to do things you don't know how to do. For example, in this meeting, they say, "Oh, let's go to your office in Los Angeles," because Darius has told them we have an office that we don't have.
Damn it, Darius.
Damn it. So I shat a brick, and Darius, he's French, smooth French style, says, "Oh, we should come to your operation in Mexico and meet your staff, see your facility." And they're like, "That's a great idea. Come on down." They fly us first class, put us in a 5-star hotel. And I was like, what just happened?
That's a Jedi mind trick right there. I've had that same thing happen to me where clients would ask me, "Hey, can we come watch you guys edit and come to your studio?"
Right.
And at the time, living in my parents' basement.
Closed
And
door
I'm like,
sessions.
well,
let
me ask my mom and see if she's okay with you coming by, because I got to just let them know about guests.
Right.
And then you just figure out a way to work around it. You don't tell them the truth.
No.
You can't.
No. And I'm not into misleading clients, but
when you live with your parents, or when you
sometimes you gotta.
Yeah. Sometimes.
It's. I think if it's coming from the right place, which in this particular instance it absolutely was. Like, we were definitely trying to help this company for sure because they needed help.
What I probably would have done if I was Darius would be not to tell them I had a studio. I think that there's ways to not lie, and to
he's a more is more kind of guy though.
Yeah.
And I'm not a it works with the minimalism. I'm not a more is more kind of guy. So so he had like the full court press of like what we can do, what we have, all that kind of stuff, and I'm a much more modest about it, and I try to let the work speak. And
I feel the same way. Like, there are certain people where their confidence will take them very, very far. I'm the kind of person that's like, I probably have to work twice as hard as that person because I'm not going to be...
I haven't oversold it.
I'm not that good at selling. So I'm
I'm
just going to let it speak for itself. So then your work really needs to speak for itself.
Yeah. And I've learned actually with the cookie thing...
Let's look at some of these cookies
how
too.
to sell. Actually, yeah.
So we got some stuff here.
Samples. Sorry about that. So these are 3D printed.
Oh, get out of here.
Yeah.
So is this what would be on in location in a store?
No, that's more what would be...
This is the actual branding. This is amazing.
So this is the actual product here in this bag. Right?
Oh, okay.
So it
Cool.
looks like
That's
what's in the store on a shelf.
Dude, that's beautiful.
Thank you. I I say it all the time. This is what you can do with Amazon and a design degree. Now, so I get the bags currently off of Amazon from an awesome supplier, and I'm very close to moving into fully printed bags. But these are stickers on a bag. I print the stickers myself.
It's crazy.
Stick
You wouldn't
them
even
on
notice
myself.
like when you first look at it, and then once you mention it, I notice
like,
it.
Indeed.
But nobody would ever notice that.
Right, and so and again, that's where a bit of...
I'm hungry. Can I eat one?
Yeah. Just go ahead and unscrew the top there. And so this is kind of... Originally, it was an idea from my girlfriend. She's like, well, you need kind of a sampler display to sort of show to people. Or really more, we were talking about it more as a countertop display, more like a promo item. Like, hey, if you buy 3 cases, you get this cool 3D printed stand that you can just like leave out and maybe sell the cookies for $1 or 50 cents to someone, or you can just sample them for free. It's worked much more effectively as a sales tool for me to try to sell them into different retail shops or restaurants, because people get they really dig the design thing, and I'm trying to do this very clean, transparent.
This is amazing, by the way.
Thank you.
This is like...
And I'm going to show you what I show accounts all the time that I walk into, like that, like the love is real. Is this tattoo of a cupcake.
That's amazing. That's so cool.
Which I can actually tell the funny story of that. So I've been baking a long time. My mom got me started. My grandma helped her learn how to bake. And so actually, so I told you before, I almost got married when I lived in New York. And so we're not doing the ring thing. And
Good for you, man. Good for you. I'm trying to talk Nat out of it.
I mean, we just were like, there are so many other things that we could spend that money on, like a house or something, or down payment on a house or something like that seemed more practical to us. And so, and I'll tell you a funny sidebar story to that in a second too. But basically we were like, well, let's get tattoos because that's affordable, special, and we'll have it a long time. And we're still good friends now, like we're homies. And so, I mean, I think of her frequently. She's a great person. And like, I love that I have a piece of her on my arm, but it's also this other thing too. It's a sketch of a cupcake because I love baking. And so there's a secret in what the shape of the layout of the sprinkles is. But anyways,
that's cool.
And so to the ring thing though, eventually what happened is we were engaged for only like 9 months or so, but she started getting the look, which is when you tell someone you're engaged as a woman, bam, they look right at your left hand.
Isn't that messed up?
And now you got to explain it every time to people that may not be of the mind of, I'm not getting a ring.
Yeah.
And that became tiresome. So she went and got a cubic zirconia just so she didn't have to explain it to people.
Yeah.
And I'm like, respect. I can respect that. That is a practical way to get around just not having to.
And you know, the first thing that people say is probably like, oh, is he cheap? Right? They're like, oh, so he didn't want to buy you a ring. He talked you out of a ring.
Right.
Come on, of course you want a ring.
Right. And pro tip, ladies, she proposed to me.
Oh,
she's that kind of woman. She's like, this is what I want. I'm going to go get it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
yeah. He said yes.
Yeah, he said yes. So, and then later we both were like, oh, no.
It's not working out.
Not working out.
You want to do quick questions?
Yeah.
Quick questions is a segment where I ask quick questions. You don't have to give quick answers, but question number 1. What's the simplest advice that's hardest to follow?
I think being yourself, be yourself. That's a tough at times. I think it gets much easier as you're more aware of it and practice it. But like I was mentioning one of your podcasts I was listening to with Jacob on the way over here, that we have these roles and these rituals that we play into, like when you're around family versus friends versus, awareness helps balance all that out, I think. But it's tough at times. You're like, but I'm, sometimes for me it's like, well, I'm the black dude, or I'm the dreads dude, or you know what I mean, or I'm the design dude, you know what I mean? And,
I'm the minimalist dude.
Yeah, and just thinking about the fullness of your personality, and being okay with that like there are lots of facets to me. It took me a minute to be okay with the baking and the design, and that these were related, but I did not understand them as that.
What's the most inspirational sentence that you could think of?
This is a quote from, I don't think it's from William McDonough. I think it's someone else's quote, but I heard him say it. You don't have to be the best. Just do what only you can do.
What's the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning?
I snuggle the dog, who is real close by. That's probably the first thing is I spend time with my dog Leo, because a lot of times during the day I feel badly that I'm so stuck on the computer. And he's just over there like laying with this sweet little heart of gold. And I feel like I sometimes am kind of ignoring him, but I'm also like, what gratitude, young man, I could be in an office. So
it's very easy for your first thing to do when you wake up is check email. Yeah. And I think that's the worst thing. You got to do something for yourself.
Yeah. Do something for yourself. Try to wake up a little early. I often meditate in the morning. That's when I find the best time to do 10, 15, 20 minutes. So one of those two things. I'm spending time with the dog or I'm meditating.
What's one skill that you've leveraged in a way that others haven't?
I think I believe in my ideas in a way that can bring value to something, in a way that like people in that organization would never have thought of. What's
the one meal that you eat the most?
The most? Probably...
Besides cookies.
I make this almost every day after yoga. I drink a smoothie, which is almost basically like chocolate milk at this point, but it's like ice, almond milk, Vega 1 protein powder. Love the chocolate. And I put 2 tablespoons of sunflower butter in there and put in my little magic bullet baby blender thing. It's like drinking chocolate milk, as I recall. Love it. So every day. I pretty much have one of those.
Yeah, I got the Vitamix. So what I'll do is like batch. I'll make green smoothies. Uh-huh. So and I have those, the shaker bottles for working out.
Yeah.
So I just take like the little shaker thing outside of it, and then I'll make 3 at once.
Okay.
And then it'll last me usually 2 days. Like 3 days is iffy.
Yeah.
I got one in the fridge right now. That's on the like the 4th day. I'm like, I'll smell it. I'll give it a smell test later and see if it's worth drinking. But yeah, smoothies I feel like are the best and easiest way to get those nutrients into your body.
Absolutely. Yeah.
How about one last question? Well, 2 technically, but name one thing that people should listen to or read before they go to bed tonight.
I would say something you should listen to, or something you could look up and find on YouTube or something. There's a fellow named Dr. Bruce Lipton. I saw him at a thing called Uplift Talks, that the way he talks about health and what causes things, man, I understood immediately why people were standing up and clapping. Like when they introduced him after his talk, I was like, oh yeah, that dude. So look up Dr. Bruce Lipton and just like watch a video.
Cool.
Yeah.
And how should people connect with you online?
They can look me up on the Instagram at InsteadCo, theoriginal.article.com, theinsteadcompany.com, and also check out the podcast, which is called The Rhymers Guild. That's on iTunes. Me and my buddy Amir sit on my couch and we talk about hip hop.
Sweet, man. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for coming on the show.
Man, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to The Ground Up Show. If you like this podcast, there's something you can do right now to help. Head on over to iTunes and leave a quick review. I print out every single one and I put them up on my mood board above my bed. Okay, that's not true, but I still notice and appreciate every one. For more on The Ground Up Show, including behind-the-scenes videos, check out groundupshow.com. Thanks for listening.